our studio is going to be off-site pretty soon for an event. We are going to be teaching a group of people how to use Silkscreens. Silkscreens are a really great tool if you're not really comfortable with drawing or you don't like to draw at all. They can be used, mostly I like to use them on flat surfaces like plates and platters. You can use them on a curved surface like a mug. It just poses an additional challenge. So it's best to start if you've never done them on a flat surface. So anyways, I have not done them in a while, used them in a while, I should say, and I thought I would experiment. And so this was my first trial run here. And I thought, well, maybe I'll make a little video and share it, and you guys can come in to the studio someday and ask to see our silk screens. There are additional costs to use because they're pretty fragile. They don't last forever, and they are kind of expensive. But this is what they look like. You can see most sheets have a couple different things that you can choose from, but we have a lot of them, and they are very underused in this studio. So maybe this video will inspire a couple of you to try them. So this was my test. Turned out pretty decent. I want to make sure I really know what I'm talking about. I'm going to do another one on this plain tile. And the pineapple is a really popular piece of ceramic here. We have pineapples in a lot of different shapes, so I thought this would be a really easy place to start. And all I'm going to do is, you know, I can position it really however I want. I can center it, off center it. Maybe for this one I'll do it diagonal. That's diagonal. I think that's diagonal. And you just place it on your ceramic. Nice, clean, dust-free ceramic. Clean, dry stencil. And if you want to tape it, you can to hold it into place. If you need to trim it, some of the stencils I'll allow it to be trimmed, but they don't really have to be. You just have to make sure that if you don't want this filled in, you can put a piece of tape over it, or just make sure to not pull the glaze all the way down. It's really easy, actually. So first step is to get our glaze ready. This was the little bit of remnants that I had left over from the first experiment. And like I said, I'm just using black, so it's number 15. And then I use this stuff. It's silkscreen medium. And the importance of silkscreen medium is that it makes your glaze a little thicker. If you've ever done any stenciling or silk screening, if just with regular paints or inks, you'll know that if your medium is too watery, it will slide underneath the image, and you'll get some really blurry lines. So we want to prevent that. And glaze can be pretty thin. So adding a little bit of silkscreen medium thickens it up really quickly, and you kind of want it the consistency of a little thinner than a peanut butter. But this is what it looks like that. It's just a really fine powder. Don't ask me what it is. I don't know. I could look it up, I'm sure, and figure it out. All right, so I'm just gonna, and I start small. I just add a little teeny bit. I'm gonna leave the cap off and set it to the side. And then what happens is when you start mixing it, it gets pasty, but it also gets pretty chunky. So you wanna get those chunks out. And this process can take a while depending on how much glaze you're working with and how much of the silkscreen medium you've added. But you just want to use a palette knife and go back and forth, scraping it, pulling it, and just manipulating it however is comfortable for you. And I just like to really make sure that any of those chunks are out and it's nice and smooth, but you see how it really changes the consistency of the glaze, and it's nice and thick. And I think we're almost there. You really don't need a whole lot of product when you're using a silk screen, because you're really just forcing it through the fine mesh of the design. So it's a very, very small amount that's needed. And I think we are pretty much there. All right. All right, so I'm gonna wipe off the excess of my palette knife. I'm gonna set this aside a little bit. I think I've decided that I will go forward and do this way. I guess it's diagonal. I don't really know. I guess it doesn't really matter, right? This is the way I'm gonna do it. So I wanna get it basically even, centered. And I use my finger. I think some people, I've seen them use these little spouncers. Some people pull it with palette knives or squeegees. I think that's great, whatever works for you. But because I know how delicate these are, I think the tool that's the softest, meaning your finger, is probably the best for the longevity of your silk screen. So I use my finger, and it's okay to get a little messy. Glaze is very washable. So I take a little bit on my finger and I just start pressing it into the design and filling all those white spots. And then as I work, I kind of pull down and keep going. So when you're doing this, it's important to have a little bit of control of the stencil. Like I said, tape helps. If you're confident you don't need tape, you can just hold it and kind of pull it taut. Now, this is where I could easily make a mistake if I pull too far over or pull too far down, or my finger skips a beat. I could fill in these areas, and I don't want that. It's not part of the design that I want. All right, so now that all of the white areas filled in, I'm gonna kind of just use my finger like a squeegee, and I pull it, and I kind of get all my fingers involved in this process. It's really the best tool you have. And I start pulling any of the excess, just really making sure that those spaces are filled in, and kind of pull. Uh-oh, see, I made a little mistake. We'll fix that. And I kind of pull like on a bit of an angle, about maybe 45 degrees or so. All right, and then the big reveal. Hopefully I did a decent job. And you pull it off slowly, roll it up. Ta-da! We have a pineapple, one that we didn't have to draw. Right there is where I made that little mistake. Once it's dry, this glaze is dry, I'm gonna take a sanding stick and I can sand that right off, and it'll be like it never happened. I see there's a couple of little thin spots, one here, one up there. I can take my thin brush, dip it in some glaze, and just fill those little areas in, which is gonna be much easier than painting this whole thing by hand. Once this is dry, I'll go back in with various glaze colors, yellow, brown, maybe a couple of greens, and do some shading and some highlights with a couple different greens. But then it'll be a finished piece, and this tile can be used as a trivet. You can take this and put some cork on the back, use it as a trivet, or just a decorative coaster in your house. So there it is. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you come into the studio and want to try a stencil, just ask us for some help and we'll guide you through it. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.